What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Top 6 wide receiver rankings. Going over the top 6 today. Picked 6. I know some of you are probably confused by that, just because it's the top 2 tiers. So I got some people in tier 1, people in tier 2, cuts off at 6 for tier 3. So maybe I'll make a second video going over that, because there's actually probably 10 people in tier 3, and I didn't want to make this a super long video. So going over the top 6 today. Top 4 is pretty locked in. I feel good about that. Don't see it changing too much, barring injury. 5 and 6, a lot closer, and we will, of course, go over that. Remember, you can see my full rankings as I make edits after these videos, because there are always edits after the videos, at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. And remember, the All-In May giveaway ends when May ends, so sign up for that before June 1st for easily your best chance of winning. Stat of the day. First thing we'll do, answer to yesterday's was Matthew Stafford. It was who had the highest average intended air yards per attempt last season. Adrian Moore got that one right first. Today's stat. Which player had the fastest top speed last season? If you're wondering how fast it was, 22.3 miles per hour, which, yeah, that's pretty good, I guess. So who had that? So let's start off with Michael Thomas at 1. There's really no case to be made for anyone other than Michael Thomas. Maybe the person to have at 2, but if you're doing a ranking and you don't have Michael Thomas at 1, I don't know how you're coming up with that. Still 27, so right in that perfect range for wide receiver production, coming off a 149 reception, 1,725 yards, and 9 touchdowns, and he now has 470 receptions through his first 4 seasons. Try to understand how impressive that is. Only 16 wide receivers have ever posted more than 300 receptions in their first 4 years, with Jarvis Landry being the only other player over 350, or only other wide receiver over 350. And Michael Thomas has 470. He outscored the next closest wide receiver last season by 67 while only scoring 9 touchdowns. So it wasn't like he got super lucky with like 15, 16 touchdowns, and that's what put him over the edge. 9 touchdowns is very reasonable to project again going forward. He's been a top 7 wide receiver every single year of his career. I don't see a case for anyone other than Thomas at 1. Don't worry about them. I've seen some people in the comments saying we should be worrying about Emmanuel Sanders coming in and taking targets. No. Michael Thomas is the guy. You're locking in 125 receptions with this pick, and it's a fantastic mid-first round selection after that first tier of running backs is off the board. At 2, the only guy anyone could fathom an argument for putting over Michael Thomas. I don't think there's a case. The only other guy is Davante Adams. 169 targets in 2018, was on pace for 169 last season. There's really no reason we shouldn't expect him to finish second in targets again this season, and it shouldn't shock anyone if he ended up finishing first. If maybe Michael Thomas misses a game or 2, Adams is right behind him. This was one of the best wide receiver classes in a very long time, and yet the Packers did nothing, absolutely nothing to address the position. So if the season started right now, they're stepping into 3 wide receiver sets with Adams, Lazard, and Funchess. Who do you think Aaron Rodgers is going to throw to? Adams had double-digit targets in 11 of his final 12 weeks last season, and if you include the 2 playoff games, then he had 100 receptions for 1,300 yards and 7 touchdowns through 14 weeks. I know the Packers really want to run the ball this year, but think about it. Adams, Lazard, Funchess. He's going to be the first, second, and third read on every single passing play from Aaron Rodgers. And he is by far his preferred option in the red zone. So Adams is a phenomenal pick this season. And he's the only receiver I have with Michael Thomas in tier 1. So tier 1 is only 2 wide receivers. Michael Thomas, Davante Adams. That's it. I do think that's the order. I don't think it's going to change, but I do think they're the only 2 that deserve to be in tier 1. So going into tier 2, we've got a block of 4 players. I started off with Tyreek Hill. He is coming off his worst season since his rookie year, effectively playing 11 games because he hurt the clavicle pretty early in week 1. I think he played like 18% of the snaps. So it was really early in week 1 and then played 11 weeks after that. His season-long pace after returning from injury was 81 receptions for over 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns after coming off an incredible 87 reception for nearly 1,500 yard and 12 touchdown season. The best thing about Tyreek Hill is that ceiling. Only Odell has a higher percentage of his games go for 30 or more fantasy points. And those are the matchups that win you weeks. But I know what some of you are thinking. You're like, that's fantastic. But he's not consistent. He's like Amari Cooper. He's going to have those awesome weeks of 35 fantasy points, but then he's going to post some duds. But while his production does have the 4th highest standard deviation in his fantasy points, only 7 wide receivers have a lower percentage of their games go for single-digit fantasy points. So the swings in fantasy points are only massive because of the high end. The low end is still really good. He'll go out there and drop 35, but that doesn't mean he's going to post a dud the next week because he doesn't do it all that much. He'll be 26 all season, and he's tethered to the best quarterback in the league. So I feel really good about ranking him at 3 as the top tier 2 wide receiver. At 4, Julio Jones. Julio's coming off his worst yardage season since 2013 with 1,394 yards. You heard that right. 1,394 receiving yards was his worst since 2013. He's finished 6 consecutive seasons with at least 14 starts, and the only problem anyone ever has with Julio is the touchdowns. Over the last 6 seasons, he's dominated between the 20s, but then he's posted 6, 8, 6, 3, and 8 touchdowns, and then 6. 6 touchdowns, 8 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns, 3, 8, and 6. So he's maxing out at like 8. He's having those seasons that are a little bit lower. But here's the thing. Everyone wants to say they never use him in the red zone. Well, he led the team with 16 red zone targets, and he caught 12 of them. That's a really good percentage. He also caught 7 of 8 targets inside the 10-yard line, with only Cooper Kupp having more receptions inside the 10. So he actually had a massive red zone role last season and was just unlucky only scoring 1 time outside of there. So it's not that they didn't use him when they got close, it's that he got unlucky not scoring from further away, which isn't like him. So all of that is a positive for his potential touchdowns next year, and this is without considering the situation, right? Because Freeman, Hooper, Hardy, Sanu, they're all gone. That frees up 235 targets into what was already a very concentrated target share. Well, that's not going to be filled by Hayden Hurst and Todd Gurley, right? They're not each getting, what would that be, 117 targets? No, that's not going to happen. So think about the upside that he had already, and now you have one of, if not the most secure target shares in the league. He has the 3rd highest percentages of his games going for more than 30 fantasy points. He has by far the highest percentage go for 20 or more fantasy points, and only 3 wide receivers have a lower percentage of their games bust. So everyone wants to say that he has these low-end weeks after having like 300 receiving yards. That's just not the case. Highest percentage go for 20 or more, only 3 wide receivers have a lower percentage of bust games. He's safe, and he has massive upside, so I feel good about him at 4. What I don't feel good about is these next 2. And I feel good about them as players, but my ranking. I am not convinced who I should have at 5 and who I should have at 6. So let me know in the comment section what your take is for 5 and 6. I have Chris Godwin at 5 and DeAndre Hopkins at 6. If you want to swap them again, go for it. Why do I have Godwin at 5? In his age 23 season, he was on pace for 98 receptions, over 1,500 yards, and 10 touchdowns, finishing as the wide receiver 2 overall, again, through 14 weeks. We loved Godwin coming into the season, and we love him again this year. So why not rank him higher then, right? Well, he's got the quarterback change. And while there are a ton of reasons to like the change, it's still a change, and that adds risk. Personally, I think it adds more risk to Evans than it does Godwin, and that's why I have Evans lower in the rankings. Brady loves targeting the slot, and as good as Edelman is, Godwin is better, and he is an elite wide receiver even this early in his career. And if they can get the timing down, he's going to have a special season. But the if is why I have him at 5 and not 3. If there was no if we knew the connection was there, Brady'd been on the team for a few years, he'd be at 3. That's how good he is. That's how good his production should be. But we don't know for sure, and that's why I have him at 5. And they say, okay, well, if you're that unsure, just move Hopkins up to 5 and have him at 6. Not so fast. He's changing teams. And we know for a fact that wide receivers changing teams are more volatile in that first season. No, I love Hopkins, and he's a top 3 wide receiver talent in the league. He's commanded 150 targets in 5 straight seasons while staying completely healthy through his entire career. So if he finishes the season as the #1 wide receiver in fantasy, nobody should be surprised. That's how good he is, that's how good Kyler is, and the offense should be good as well. But he's changing teams. And while Kyler Murray is better than Baker Mayfield, we need to learn our lesson from last season. The target share is uncertain. The connection is uncertain. What they do in the red zone is uncertain. The play volume overall, while we think it'll be high, is uncertain. There's a lot of uncertainty that we're not used to with DeAndre Hopkins. So while he's likely to return value, I think wide receiver 6 is a really good spot for him. So that's my top 6 as of May 25th. I can promise you these rankings are going to change from now until week 1. So if you want to get the most up-to-date rankings, you can view it at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But that's the end of this one. I hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting that like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new? Thanks for watching.